Every puzzle has an answer.
I'm about to tell you about the fight between one of the weakest characters in the entire power scale of this anime and the most broken one in all of Re:Zero. I'm not exaggerating. Reinhard is the strongest being in this universe. He's got so much power that even if everyone in the world was against him, he'd still come out on top. His opponent in this video has only one ability: the power to die and rewind time a little. This is the story of their fight, a battle in which Aldebaran had to die 132,014 times just to seem to have a shot at winning. I'll break down everything he did to face someone who, even if he died, would just come back to life. Just so you know, this all goes down right after the Garfield versus Aldebaran fight, so if you want to know what's going on, you should probably watch that first. But if you're watching from my English channel, stay tuned. I'll translate the original video soon. It's the battle between the world's most beloved and the world's most hated, Reinhard versus Aldebaran. While on the run on a dragon after sealing Subaru and beating his allies, Aldebaran hears a voice warning him that this is as far as his betrayal will go. Then, the dragon he's riding gets hit by a beam of light. Aldebaran and the dragon, Alkanika, crash to the ground. Because of some details in the book, I should mention that the dragon is inhabited by a copy of Aldebaran's consciousness. So, you could say there are two Aldebarans in this moment, but only the human version has the power to return from death. When they're hit by the light and fall, Reinhard only sees Aldebaran landing safely. But the truth is that Aldebaran died hundreds of times trying to land without getting fatally injured. The text makes it clear that sometimes he'd break his neck, or worse, shatter his spine. It took him a bunch of resets to figure out he could grab onto a protrusion on the dragon's body to land safely. Now that he can land without dying, he talks to Reinhard, who tells him to surrender. Aldebaran just mutters, "Your stars were bad." Then Alkanika does a sudden breath attack. Aldebaran had used the dragon's breath against Subaru's allies before, but it was nothing compared to this. Back then, it was just a small breeze because he didn't want to kill anyone. But now this attack is no joke. Aldebaran knows Reinhard isn't just any human, but the current Sword Saint just blocks it with the sword's hilt. When asked why he doesn't even have a burn, he says he has the divine protection of sunburn, meaning he can't be burned by anything. In the world of Re:Zero, there's a mysterious force that can give you a divine blessing when you're born. These powers can range from small perks to godlike abilities. Most people would be lucky to get one, but Reinhard is the only human in this story with 252 divine protections. We'll be discovering more of them as this fight unfolds. After escaping the flames, Reinhard jumps into the air and starts fighting the dragon mid-flight. He uses just his legs to counter Alkanika's fierce attacks. The sound of the battle echoes across the land as Aldebaran watches, figuring out how best to use his power. Even if he can come back from the dead, there are conditions to activate it. Subaru and Aldebaran are different in this way. Subaru can't choose where he wants to return, but Aldebaran can. He can set a save point to choose the point he wants to return to. Once he sets it, he can't move too far from it, or the power deactivates. He's set on keeping his head above water, so he starts making a plan. Out of nowhere, a star falls from the sky right at the night. A meteor is heading right for Reinhard. I should mention that summoning a meteor is something that very few people can do. So how'd some average guy named Aldebaran do it? Well, there was this super powerful witch named Echidna in the past. After some revelations, it came out that she had been his mentor, not only sharing all her knowledge, but also making spells just for him. Aldebaran might not have the natural ability or resources to do magic like that, but he does know how the witch's most powerful spells work. Now that he's got the nation's dragon under his control, he uses its body to make up for what he lacks: magical talent and mana reserves. The most intriguing part? The helmeted man already knew he'd fight Reinhard, so he came up with a bunch of backup plans, and the flaming meteor was just one of them. Earlier, the dragon Alkanika had a scuffle with Reinhard. Even though it was outmatched, it tried its best, attempting to bury the swordsman in sand with its massive claws, only for Reinhard's divine protection of sandplay to activate, rendering the tactic useless. Reinhard was eager to end the fight, so he kicked the dragon skyward, then leaped so fast he overtook it mid-air. Just as he was about to swing it down toward the ground, he saw the incoming meteor. The lore says that this spell was originally created to go beyond dragon breath using magic. If you can stimulate and absorb mana, you can theoretically pull stars from the cosmos to use as weapons. Alkanika didn't hesitate. It hit Reinhard with its wings, not to make him run away, but to throw him toward the meteor. The dragon knew the night had the divine protection of clouds, which let him walk on the clouds. the dragon roared to disperse the clouds, leaving Reinhard no escape. As Reinhard hurtled toward his doom, Aldebaran and Alcanica awaited the explosion, but it never came. It turns out that Reinhard had the divine protection of ball balancing, which let him manipulate any spherical object at will. A meteor might be catastrophic, but at its core, it's just a ball, a very big one. Reinhard landed on its side, scaled it, then kicked it back at the dragon. Alcanica, sensing imminent danger, blasted the returning sphere with its breath, a grave mistake. The impact detonated the meteor, raining literal explosions across the battlefield. Aldebaran was badly burned, but he heard something crash beside him. It wasn't an explosion, though. It was his ally Alcanica, whose wings were shattered and body broken. Reinhard, who hadn't been hurt at all, came down and said, "It's over." Aldebaran said one thing. The dragon fired a weak breath attack at its own counterpart, a suicide attempt. Reinhard caught the blast, shocking the traitor with his unnecessary mercy. Aldebaran stored this intel for the next loop, then took a molar-embedded poison pill. Agony coursed through his body as his blood boiled. "Next time I'll nail it." So, that was the 8,466th attempt. I know it's shocking that Aldebaran's died over 8,000 times, but the fight proves it. He knew things that were impossible to predict unless he'd already died gathering intel, like Reinhard's cloud-walking ability before witnessing it, or preemptively countering protections never before seen. But let's get back to the story. Aldebaran hears Reinhard's voice again. Reinhard warns him that this is as far as he'll get. Aldebaran just tells him to shut up and says he's going to win. He adds one more time, "Your stars were bad." Determined to defeat Reinhard, Aldebaran considers all of his enemy's possibilities and capabilities. He analyzes Reinhard's body, technique, and heart. Regarding his body, Reinhard was born with Odd and mana unlike anyone else's. In short, Odd is the inner energy of every living being that allows them to use the mana in the air. Reinhard was born with unmatched Odd and mana control. This allowed him, from birth, to have excellent mana circulation within his body. In the world of Re, people can do amazing things like great jumps or powerful attacks because of how their bodies move mana around. It takes years to master this technique, but Reinhard was a natural from the get-go. While most people need to concentrate and take a deep breath to use the technique properly, Reinhard only needs to take a single short breath to multiply another person's feet hundreds of times, and he can do this without even trying. However, when Aldebaran analyzed his techniques, he managed to identify all of Reinhard's divine protections. He discovered that Reinhard had 252 in total. Some were useful in combat, such as the divine protection that allowed him to always land the first hit and dodge his opponent's attacks. Others were environment-based, such as the divine protection that prevented him from sinking in sand, or the one that made him stronger under a blue sky. Some were outright jokes, such as the divine protection that allowed him to distinguish between salt and sugar. Finally, Aldebaran analyzed Reinhard's heart, which was probably his weakest point. The knight had a different view of what it meant to be the Sword Saint. However, to others, his perspective on the role's significance was irrelevant. Ultimately, Reinhard was just a cog in the greater goal of eliminating the enemies of his homeland and the world. Now that Aldebaran had analyzed every key part of Reinhard, he was ready to make his next move. He heard Reinhard's voice again, telling him that this was as far as he would get. He's now on attempt 8,888. He discovers that the tainted air produces toxic mana, which weakens Reinhard. In other words, there is no place in the world where Reinhard is weaker than here. This is good news for Aldebaran and bad news for Reinhard. Aldebaran then casts a spell called Al-Karum, which creates a gravitational field that distorts everything around it. His ally, Alcanica, is crushed by her own weight. However, Reinhard manages to stay on his feet and keep fighting through sheer brute strength, even while weakened. On attempt 10,212, the area is surrounded by ice walls, and a thick mist begins to fill the space. Such a concentration in a closed space causes steam explosions. Aldebaran endured all these annoyances just to find an explosion that would bypass Reinhard's protection against water and fire. Since it was a steam explosion, a combination of both elements, his protections didn't activate. In other words, he found a loophole in Reinhard's defenses thanks to this world's underdeveloped level of civilization compared to his original world. However, Aldebaran stopped celebrating when he realized that the governing being adapted to the situation by granting Reinhard 2 new resistances that nullified the damage caused by his latest discovery. Aldebaran hears Reinhard's warning for the 16,008th time. Aldebaran uses the temperature gradient between water and fire to create thunderclouds. With the help of earth and wind magic, he charges Reinhard's sword with electricity. Why did he bother with this? By charging Reinhard's sword with electricity, he ensured that the lightning from the thunderclouds would strike him. The knight may be fast, but he isn't faster than the speed of light. Even though all of this was useless because the knight could withstand lightning strikes thanks to his divine protection, which allowed him to resist thunder damage. At least this method pinned Reinhard down to one spot. Then Aldebaran took the opportunity to launch the attack he had prepared, only to discover that Reinhard had 2 divine protections that reduced the damage he received. He heard Reinhard's warning for the 64,799th time. Since he was still processing the circumstances of the previous loop, he forgot to grab onto the dragon's protrusion when Reinhard attacked him in midair. He fell to his death, but not wanting to die from a broken spine or neck, he decided to take the pill again. Then he felt his blood start to boil. He is now on his 132,014th attempt. Aldebaran makes it clear that he has heard Reinhard's warning many times. He tells us that whenever they fought, the battle lasted only 2 minutes. The first thing he does is show his companion, Alcanica, the Book of Death. The book contains a person's entire life and death. Aldebaran uses the book to make his companion aware of all their plans together up to this point. In other words, he wants his companion to know every variable they've used across these 100,000+ attempts. Another use for this book is to make someone else read it. The trauma and information overload of experiencing someone else's life stuns the reader. Aldebaran tried this with Reinhard, but the knight had divine protection, which weakened mental attacks. In this loop, Aldebaran casts a massive fire spell called Al-Goa through the dragon. The spell engulfs the entire desert landscape in flames. He ensured the attack's shape wasn't spherical. Otherwise, it would have been neutralized by Reinhard's divine protection. The spell was reportedly so massive and powerful that the sand in the area turned to glass due to the extreme heat. Reinhard didn't understand why Aldebaran was doing this if he had divine protection, which granted resistance to fire, until he realized he couldn't breathe. Aldebaran had eliminated the oxygen in the area using his 21st century knowledge. He decided to use this complicated plan because it was the only way to attack with natural elements and cause damage. Neither Reinhard nor the entity protecting him understood this phenomenon discovered by modern civilization. He took advantage of this opening and had the dragon Alcanica shoot a white light to immobilize Reinhard. He has finally overcome 2 of the 3 elements that made the knight strong. He found a way to bypass his divine protections and weaken his body by removing the oxygen and exploiting the area's toxic mana. Only 1 element remained. Then he yells, "Plan L29! With his earth magic, he created a railgun that used the dragon's scales as bullets. Taking advantage of the magnetic properties of Reinhard's sword, he fires shots directly at him. Reinhard couldn't dodge them. Even though he had divine protections that allowed him to avoid attacks, they didn't help him this time. He barely managed to let the bullets graze him. It is said that even the graze of the bullets caused him great pain. The next bullet hit Reinhard and sent him flying backward, or so it seemed. In reality, he jumped back to grip his sword and endure the impact of the shots more easily. He pulled off this maneuver with his left arm since his right arm was bleeding and unusable. At that moment, however, Aldebaran activated his magic, Al-Karam, breaking the rules of space and time to distort reality once again. This time, however, there was a difference. You see, this was the first time in 132,014 attempts that he had actually managed to injure the knight. Since he had continuously practiced the spells, he had improved them, bringing his magic to the next level. The last time he used Al-Karam, he could barely alter the surrounding gravity. This time, however, he summoned a black sphere that behaved like a black hole. Reinhard was bleeding, though. Whenever he bleeds, one of his divine protections activates, making him stronger. Using the hilt of the legendary reed sword, said to still exist even when the world ends, he destroyed the black hole. Although the sword destroyed the black hole, it seriously injured Reinhard's healthy arm. Now, with both arms wounded, he throws his sword and kicks it toward the dragon's throat. A light pierces Alcanica, and he falls. The great dragon's fall causes enough of a disturbance that Aldebaran also falls onto the desert sands. The traitor thought he had lost again, and lamented failing to meet others' expectations, just as he had before. As Reinhard approached, Aldebaran realized that he hadn't been able to defeat Reinhard, either physically or technically. So he decided to play his final card, the one that would let him defeat Reinhard's heart. Your father has been kidnapped by one of my accomplices. That's the gist of the story. The episode of the novel that tells this story ends here. Yes, they have a conversation afterwards, but that's a whole other plot, which unfortunately doesn't fit the topic of this video. Before I finish up, I'll answer this question since I know it's coming. Why didn't Aldebaran just play the father card from the beginning? Aldebaran was stalling for time until someone showed up who could get him out of this mess. I'll be making more videos like this, so if you liked it, please leave a comment to show your support. What did you think about the fight between the world's most popular and most despised figures?